The founder and executive director of ReliefAid, Mike Seawright, is in Ukraine. The New Zealander crossed the Romanian border on foot, then travelled by car to provide aid to the Ukrainian people. And Mike is with me now. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having us on the show, Chris.
You're welcome. You've described the situation where you are the last few days as chaotic. Whereabouts are you and what's been happening?
So I travelled from the Romanian border north to Lviv, and crossing that border, it was quite amazing to see. I haven't seen it since my days in northern Iraq. Thousands of people queuing to exit the country. In fact, kilometres of cars waiting, 3 I would estimate at the time. People were reporting to me that they had been waiting 3 days to cross that border in sub-zero temperatures. Situation here is absolutely critical. I'm lucky enough to be in the northwest of the country. This is comparatively safe, especially in comparison to the likes of Mariupol in the south of the country. Nonetheless, we're getting daily air raid alerts. 3 days ago, the city itself was attacked. People here are very worried, despite it being a relative safe haven.
You were originally heading back to Syria to oversee operations there when you changed course to Ukraine. What was the defining moment that forced you to divert?
Well, we had all hoped that this war was going to end quickly, that calmer heads would prevail, humanitarian crisis would not ensue, but unfortunately that has not occurred. So we saw the needs on the ground here, albeit from afar, and felt we had to, as a war zone humanitarian organisation, we had to come here and help the people of Ukraine.
Your team of volunteers also supplying or trying to supply relief aid to the people in Mariupol. That must be an incredibly anxious time for you, given the current situation there.
Well, our partner has family in Mariupol at the moment, and I was speaking to him yesterday about what they are experiencing. And the situation, as is being reported, is absolutely horrendous. They're bunkering down in basements below their buildings. If they're lucky, they get some time above ground to seek cell coverage, reach out to their family members, tell them that they are safe. But there are long periods where they are simply unable to communicate with the outside world. They have no water, no power, no gas in sub-zero temperatures. This is a humanitarian crisis we have not seen since the days of Aleppo City, where there, as we're seeing Mariupol, the city is being levelled.
To such an incredible extent as well. I know that Russia launched missile strikes near the airport in the city where you are on Friday. What was the reaction of the people in the city that you are in at the moment? Because I know there was not a cavalier attitude, but a sense of, well, where you are should be okay. But now that's changed as a result of that Friday bombing.
Well, perhaps the best way to describe this is to describe a meeting I had the day before yesterday with a group of volunteers here in Lviv. We were having a good meeting, a chatty meeting. There was a lot of energy about what our work was going to do, how we're going to move our trucks and where the warehouses were going to be. And all of a sudden, Yelena, one of the 2 volunteers I was talking to, went quiet, went white. And I didn't quite understand what was happening at the time. But in 5 or 10 minutes later, I sort of noticed this continued and asked her, "What's wrong, Yelena?" And her family in the north of Kyiv had been, she had just received a call from her family who had reported that Russian soldiers were now at their house. So everyone's worried about what's going to happen, not just in the east, north and south of Ukraine, but also in the west. And people in Lviv are very worried.
What kind of relief aid, literally, is your organisation providing on the ground as we go to air right now?
So we're moving medical supplies to hospitals that absolutely need it. They're running in short supply. As you can imagine, casualties are high. And even common medicines and materials are needed for regular daily medical treatment, not just trauma care. So we're doing that. We're moving food in the forthcoming days to families that are displaced by the fighting, and also near the front lines where normal food supply chains are now broken. They are unable to access food without some special transport to get it to them. So this is where we're working. We've also got shelter materials moving from Europe into Ukraine.
With the international sanctions taking place now against Russia, does that give you some hope that eventually the fuel will run out, the supply chains will run out for Russia, and simply by default this war will end? Or do you think it will end in a different way? What's your gut feeling?
Well, Relief Aid is seen across the world where we work. We work in Afghanistan, Syria, and now, unfortunately, in Ukraine, that the only way the humanitarian crisis is ended is to end the fighting, to end the war. So we support sanctions that end war, but in itself, at the end of the day, humanitarian assistance, relief, food, blankets, and medical supplies are needed right here, right now, to make sure that people survive to the end of peace.
And are you getting enough supplies from the international community? Is that corridor of travel still available at the moment, or is that becoming even more tricky?
We're able to move supplies from neighbouring countries into Ukraine. This supply route is well established now and is working smoothly. Ukrainian government has fast-tracked humanitarian assistance through those borders and customs. So actually moving materials from outside the country into the country is no problem. Of course, it's a challenging act to move humanitarian assistance into frontline areas. We're working hard to keep our teams safe, to make sure that that aid reaches the people who need it most. But it is a challenging situation for sure.
Mike, how unnerving is it to constantly hear air raid sirens going off throughout the day?
Well, I think we specialise, Relief Aid specialises in conflict zone humanitarian assistance. So unfortunately, we've become a little bit immune, or I guess used to this. That said, we don't take chances. We are taking calculated risks, both for ourselves and for our teams, to make sure that they stay safe while helping others. But what I mostly fear for, Chris, is for the people of Ukraine. They don't understand where these conflicts have gone in other parts of the world, such as Syria. And my fear is an extended conflict will see devastation on a scale that we have yet to see in this century.
What do you mean by that, Mike?
We've seen in other conflicts such as Syria, cities levelled. Thousands of people moved from their homes and now into camps. I absolutely fear for the people of Ukraine that this will be a situation if the war continues. And no one is a winner in these conflicts. Warring parties and certainly the civilians that are caught in the crossfire in the middle.
Mike, I know your agency Relief Fund has been on the ground and continues to be on the ground in places in Syria. It was only a week ago that, I'm not sure you'd call it a milestone, but 11 years since that civil war started in Syria. Does it feel like 11 years for you?
Well, we've been working in Syria for 7 of those 11 years. Relief Aid has been working there. I had never envisaged that we would be needed there for that long, and I certainly don't envisage, or hope at least, that we are needed in Ukraine for that long. But we are proud of the volunteers, of the teams that we have working around the world to support our efforts, of our supporters, in fact, and that has allowed us to deliver aid to over 250,000 people since we were founded in 2015. Unfortunately, more people need help in Ukraine now, and that's what we're here to do.
Mike, on a personal level, what makes you go to these countries, some of the most dangerous places on the planet, a New Zealander in the relative safety of Kiwi land, but yet, instead of going to Syria, there you were being diverted to probably one of the most dangerous places on earth at the moment?
Well, I feel very strongly, Chris, that we have both a duty and an obligation to help those less fortunate than ourselves. We are lucky to live in a country, New Zealand is lucky to be a country that does not suffer these problems. We have our own problems for sure, and I'm very proud of New Zealanders who look after New Zealanders in New Zealand. But we have a duty, both as a community, a country, and myself as an individual, and Relief Aid as an organisation, to help in places that others are unable or unwilling to go to. So this is why we divert planes, we jump on the ground here in Romania, in Ukraine, I should say, and we do our absolute best to try and help those who need us.
Well, stay safe. I really appreciate your time. Founder and Executive Director of ReliefAid, Mike Seawright in Ukraine. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Chris.